A surprise Friday news dump. Kwesi Adofo Mensah is fired. Let's talk about it live here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a live edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. A little emergency pod here. If you're an audio listener and this is coming up as a second Friday episode, congratulations. Extra content for you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. This podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcasting network, because this is what we do, all right? We interrupt our weekends to go live when big news drops like this. Kwesi Adofo Mensah is fired. According to a statement by the Minnesota Vikings, Rob Brzezinski will take over as interim GM until the 2026 draft, which is wild. I will talk about that in a moment. And a lot of the reporting from Schefter, from some of the local beat, like Alec Lewis and somebody like Diana Rossini, that there was a lot of turmoil in the Vikings organization. And I think that somebody like Rossini, who has been kind of covering this darker side of the Vikings for years now, I think it maybe helps explain what she was on about with like Aaron Rodgers and all that last offseason that didn't come to fruition at all, that there was maybe somebody that was her source that wanted them to do that, and then they didn't do that. And that maybe explains that. I'm just guessing there, though. But now for me, the first immediate big question is what happens in the meantime, because every single day from January to April is crucial for a draft process. This is not like what we're doing where, we'll do a mock draft today, whatever. We're just kind of waiting for the day. It's not like all of the draft happens on the draft. No, you got people at the Senior Bowl right now who are trying to like cover practices, and they're going to watch the game tomorrow, who just realized their boss got fired and they don't know who to report to. Like there is immediate chaos in the ranks of just logistically getting stuff done. And I guess Rob Brzezinski is going to take over those jobs. There is a question, though, in the chat that is the next point I'm going to make, which comes from Shred CH, who asks, my question is, does Rob have any draft experience whatsoever? Well, so you may remember the triangle of authority back in like 2010-ish between Leslie Frazier, and it was Brad Childress before him. So the head coach, Rob Brzezinski, and Rick Spielman, they had a three-way sort of power structure where the three of them would make all the decisions together, from who to sign to contracts, what the contracts would look like, and everything like that. They would all get in a room, and they were like a brain trust. And the last offseason before the Vikings were like, this isn't working, was 2011. You know who they drafted in 2011? Do you remember that? It was Christian Ponder. So that's where we're at again. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Chat's realizing it now. That's where we're at now, where we are going to have, and the speculation is rampant on how this power structure will work in the draft. But if we have something like O'Connell kind of, giving the offensive personnel directives and Flores giving the defensive personnel directives and Rob Brzezinski just kind of making the logistics work, that's a triangle of authority again. Like, we cannot do this. This can't be the way. So there's like two things that are like going to be really interesting things to have opinions on, right? There's the actual firing of Kwesi Adofo Mensah and the legacy that he left, which is not good, and like what that means. I think I have heard the gamut of opinions. I've heard a lot of people say he's getting way too much blame for stuff that isn't his fault. You can't control injuries. There's, he took risks, but risks don't work out sometimes, and he knew he was risky. Like there's like a defensive angle, and it's one that I kind of still gravitate toward, where like, at the time, with what he knew, everything felt reasonable. And the fact that it all backfired a lot, it just feels really reactive and hindsighty. But I think I'm in the minority. I think most of you are like, thank God, this guy sucks. He had to go. And now the new GM, whenever he decides to show up and join the org, is going to have his work cut out for him. But what I'll say is the Vikings are not as asset light as when Kwesi took over. When Kwesi took over, the contract situations were getting saintsy. It was, there was a lot less flexibility in the contracts. And I've talked a whole bunch on Locked On Vikings just this week about how flexible they are in cap. They've got draft picks that are pretty much normal. It's not like you're taking over for the Browns right after they traded for Deshaun Watson and you're like taking over a completely broke organization. So whoever can come in can build the team in their image. But here's what's going to happen. This is what happens every time you fire a GM. The first couple years are weird. They're always going to be weird. For this regime, it was 2022, where the Vikings were probably not as good as that 13-4 record. They got a lot of luck. But there's going to be a lot of turnover, and you're going to have a lot of people doing stuff for the first time. It's just what it is with turnover, right? You don't get experienced people all the time. You get somebody new who's getting a promotion, the hot coordinator to be a coach, right? The hot assistant to be your position coach, the hot scout to go be your director of personnel. You get those exciting hires that now they have to do the job they just got promoted to for the first time. And guess who? You're never going to be good at a thing the first time. Y'all tell me what you did that you were the best at the first time and then never got better at, right? So you're going to have an organization populated with that now for a couple of years. And this is why I say patience is crucial. And this is why somebody in the chat says, are we the new Jets? This is why the Jets are the Jets, why the Browns are the Browns, why the Cardinals are the Cardinals. Because they don't have the patience. They will take those first 2 years where everybody's still figuring things out and getting used to stuff and then go, you must not be good at this. And you'll never be good at this. We're going to go get somebody new who now has to figure it out for 2 years. And you just run through regime after regime after regime after regime after regime, and you grind the thing to a nub. So I'm worried about that with firing Kwesi. I'm worried about the immediate structure basically torpedoing their ability to successfully scout this draft. And they're going to be working on, there's no way around it. They are going to be working on incomplete information, on information that was gathered under duress, under weird times. All the work that a scout does today is going to be a little off because today's a wild day. And if you've ever had that at your job where the boss gets fired and all everybody can do is gossip about it, you don't get work done. So it's going to slow you down a little bit. And that's going to mess with stuff. I think you can tell. I don't love this decision. I think, for the most part, the Vikings had built a roster that was seen as pretty good. They walked into this year, they were seen as stacked, and it was, is the quarterback going to work out? I think the I think the way, like, the kicker here is obviously Sam Darnold doing well over in Seattle. But I really don't think that it was about that. It wasn't about Sam Darnold in Seattle. I think that the QB decision going poorly had been percolating in the organization for a long time. I think this was publicly reported. I don't think I've blown up anybody's spot. That mid-season, there were whispers that people in the organization were looking at each other going, why didn't we keep this Sam Darnold guy? We're 4-8. Why didn't we keep this Sam Darnold guy? And I think that had begun to create tension, right? And doubt in the GM. And it's wild to me that Kwesi is the one taking the bullet, because I know KOC had a ton to do with both the decision to pick JJ McCarthy, where he was given carte blanche, and then the decision to stay with McCarthy, because guess what? O'Connell loved that guy. Don't ever let anyone tell you that O'Connell got forced into picking JJ McCarthy. We all remember those combine reports. We know what was going on there. They loved that guy. Kevin loved that guy. And if it doesn't work out, it's wild that somebody else is taking the bullet for Kevin O'Connell. In terms of personnel control, I don't know if Flores gets part of this. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell gets part of this. There's some people in the chat that are saying there's going to be, a sort of division of responsibilities, at least for this one. But it's going to be really weird. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go over Kwesi's legacy in terms of transactions. It's only 4 years, so it shouldn't take us that long to just quickly review and ask ourselves, does this feel like the worst thing in the league? Because there are bad things, but I think they get a lot more attention than what the good things are. And at the end of the day, it's obviously not going to go down good, but they did win significantly more games than they lost under his tenure. Will the next guy be able to do that? It's actually going to be a tougher act to follow than you might be thinking right now. Plus, Where do we go from here? So that'll all be next here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, with no stress, no guesswork. You don't have to worry about figuring out forms, figuring out what number goes into what box, or worrying about if you're getting things in on time. Is it going to be mailed on time? You can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they will handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and whenever you're worried about it, you can get updates right in the TurboTax app and know where your person is at. They're going to do everything for you, and they know how to find these deductions. So you're going to have somebody who knows what they're doing, who is in your court. For a limited time, you can have taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It is that time. All right. There's one game left, one final Sunday, one last kickoff, and the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. Personally, I like the weird props, the Gatorade color, that kind of thing. But maybe you want to do something with former Vikings, right? Sam Darnold, Stephon Diggs, same game parlay, something like that. Whatever it is, if you are new, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Hey, if you are an everydayer, if you're here all the time and you want to go ad-free, you can with the Everydayer Club. You get Locked On Vikings episodes interruption-free for $5 a month or $50 a year at lockedonvikings.supercast.com. You also get access to a special Discord that is popping off right now, and you can get a whole bunch more as well. That's once again with the Locked On Everydayer Club at lockedonvikings.supercast.com, or you can go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to learn more. Okay, let's do a little bit of hindsight analysis. The Kwesi era, like the legacy of Kwesi, is going to mess some stuff up. There's not going to be another analytics GM for a while. And if you remember, the whole point of hiring Kwesi, I'm trying to remind you of what things were like at the time, because we get so hindsight. How could they possibly hire this guy? Well, here's how they could hire this guy. It was 2021. There was a lot of toxicity in the org. We're here again. And Rick had been the guy for 20 years. He had been in the organization. He'd been the true GM for 9 of those years, but he had been, they had this very stable system. And that system had gone stale. With Zimmer and the toxicity and all that was one thing, but it was also, we've had this very traditional. Spielman was a player, and then he was a scout, and he was a scout for years and years, and then he was a GM a little bit, in the early 2000s, and then he was a director of pro personnel for the Vikings for a long time. So they had this very stable, it was like the most chalk GM ever. Player to scout to short tenure to executive back to GM. That is like the standard path. And they wanted to go outside of that. The whole directive was, we've been normal and it's gotten us to 10-6 and maybe a wild card berth and a first round exit. They needed to do something that was out there. They felt like they needed to find a new approach, to go back to the cutting edge and stop being middle of the pack. That was what they got Kwesi to do. That's why they went for the young analytics guy. And they were like, we're the Wilfs. We're going to, stick by this guy for 20 years. And so not doing that undermines that idea, right? You get somebody who's new at the thing, and then when they make mistakes becoming of somebody who is new at the thing, you fire the guy, and now you need somebody else who's new at the thing. Like, this is the cycle that you need to break out of now. But they have a desire to, take risks, do the thing. They also don't ever want to rebuild, right? So they do the competitive rebuild thing. And if you remember, the competitive rebuild was the reporting was that they were going to, or that the Wilfs had something to do with that directive, that there was a little bit of a push. And the push, to my understanding of it, was you can't bottom out. You can't polls this. You can't go, we're going to be 4-13 for a year and get a draft pick. You have to try every year. Does that mean we're going to expect a Super Bowl immediately? No, but you have to do something. And that first year was 2022, so the directive was satisfied. And I remember a quote from Kwesi where he was asked about the competitive rebuild, and he kind of said, hey, that's he I think it was at the combine, and he was like, well, that isn't necessarily what my first idea was going to be, but it's what we're doing. And, it's a little riskier, but we're going to make it work. I remember he said it's a little risky, a little extra risky, but we're going to make it work. And it made me think, oh, this wasn't his idea. That they brought this guy in and then told him not to do the plan he had, which is wild. And I probably should have put more emphasis on it at the time. So with that, you get the 2022 draft, Scene, Booth, Asamoah, disaster, right? And you also get the 2022 free agency, which is, and the Donatel hire, which brings in a bunch of guys that are kind of just for that. You get like Zadarius Smith and stuff. That worked out okay. So the free agents worked out okay. Draft was bad, right? Everybody knows the 2022 draft was bad. I don't need to relitigate that. Then you get 2023. You get Addison, way better, right? You get Mekhi Blackmon in that draft. You traded your second round pick for TJ Hawkinson. I am going to plant my flag that the 2023 draft acquired good players. Trading away Mekhi Blackmon this year was insane. For a third round pick, I think he's been fine. Addison has been good for a first round pick. TJ Hawkinson has been much better than whatever else you get with a second round pick. I think that those two, I think you're 1-1 at this point. And then 2024, obviously, I think Dallas Turner, we can be a lot more forgiving about. And then you have the JJ McCarthy thing. The JJ McCarthy thing is going to, the JJ McCarthy pick and then picking him over Sam Darnold is going to define the Vikings and Kwesi Adofo Mensah's tenure, whether we like it or not. And the fact that this happened right after the NFC Championship game is going to define this firing, whether you like it or not. I don't think that's what it was about, but it will go down in history like that was what it was about, because it's just the two things are next to each other. It's a Mary Magdalene situation. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. History misremembers things when they're adjacent. That's what that is. But like, okay, if Sam Darnold like screws up in the Super Bowl and throws an interception that makes him like the GOAT of the game, like this is going to look weird, right? Like this can't be about that. It can't be now, because there's always the chance that like, what if the Patriots blow them out and they win 30-9 and it's over, So in 2024, they had that, but they also had this unbelievable free agency with Cashman and Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel that, again, the pro side was great. The young player side wasn't as great. And in 2025, I would say we did the opposite. I actually like how the 2025 draft is turning out pretty well. But the pro acquisition side, not so much, right? With like Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen not living up to those huge contracts that they gave him. And so that undermines the thing we thought was the strength here, which was, okay, at least he knows how to go get pro guys and make the contracts good, right? What I wonder is, what are the analytics-y things that we say? I mean, trading down with Kyle Hamilton on the board for Lewis Cine was a very analytics-y move. It's, we can get a first-round safety plus, or we can get just a first-round safety here. And that's a very short-sighted, it's very Twitter analytics to like go for that. And it obviously blows up really hard in his face. I think one of the analytics-y things, and this is going to sound really funny, Tryon anyway in the chat says, multiple trade ups in 2024 blew through capital. The draft trade chart that Kwesi has does not match anybody else's. I forgot about that Bolin Soft. That the Kevin O'Connell's QB killer thing. There was a comment in the chat. Yeah, he was in control of this. Like, I didn't think we had questions about that. But anyways, so every GM now has a trade chart like the Jimmy Johnson one, but they aren't the Jimmy Johnson one. They use different numbers and different ratios and stuff because everybody has their own studies on how much a draft pick is worth versus how much a different draft pick is worth. And so that's how trades get done because both sides think they're getting the better end of the deal. And Kwesi would trade a lot because he always thought he was getting the better end of the deal. His trade chart was very weird. It was very different than everybody else. And it did not value trading down as much as everybody else's trade chart did. So when they did the Kyle Hamilton, Lewis Cine trade down, they also got less than you should get for that, which was my critique at the time was, I don't mind the idea of trading down. We don't know how these guys are going to work out, but why didn't you get more? You could have gotten more, especially in the division. So that was always weird, and maybe they'll go back to being a little bit normal now, depending on who takes over. But that's the next thing that I want to ask. Who is going to take over? I'll take some ideas from the chat. Who do you think should be the GM? If you're here in the live chat, if you're not, hey, lock in when big news happens. But if you're here in the live chat, let me know who you think should be GM. Is it somebody who's already in the building? Is it not somebody who's already in the building? There are a couple of people that they actually interviewed last time that are still available. So we can talk about those, and I'll probably do a whole breakdown of these like I did last time next on the Locked On Vikings podcast. This Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hey, it's important to hire the right guys. I think we're learning that today. Indeed is all you need to get your job posts seen on other sites. What you don't want when you're trying to hire somebody is a truncated pool of whoever's that don't actually fit your job. Indeed can help you with that. If you need to hire somebody, go straight to Indeed, and you can be very specific about what you need with real experience, not just like resume buzzwords or stifling drop-down menus. You can be very specific about what you need, and Indeed will get your job post in front of the people that fit that role, the best match for you and your company. Sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. You can spend more time interviewing candidates who will check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Here are some ideas. A bunch of people say not Grigson. So obviously the path of least resistance would be just take the highest ranking executive and promote him and say Kwesi was the issue. Now we've made that would be like the sacrificial lamb move. If it's just, hey, things are going bad, a head needs to roll, but we don't want to blow this whole thing up. You cut the head off the snake, you promote the next guy and say, hey, don't change anything. We're actually doing okay. We just needed to do this for publicity. That would be the Grigson move. I doubt that this happens. And here's the thing. For everybody in the organization, from Grigson to even Brzezinski to scouts and front office executives, whoever comes in next, they're going to have to interview for their job with that guy. That's how this works. That's how it works when you hire a new head coach as well. So all of those guys should probably be updating their Indeed profiles. Mike Tomlin is an interesting idea. I believe Mike Tomlin is going into TV. That's been the report, so probably not available. Will Henry says bring George Paton back. I don't know about that. Paton, why Paton? I mean, drafting Bo Nix was not something that they got a choice in. So even if you say, oh, Bo Nix was really the right choice, what you're really saying is the Vikings were wrong to take McCarthy over Nix, which not many people had that at the time. I think if the Vikings took Nix over McCarthy, it would have been one of the hottest take draft picks we had seen since pick 8 of that draft when Penix went. So I don't think that I give George Paton a lot of credit for that. And honestly, they've been a pretty average team for most of the time that they've been here. He hired Nate Hackett. Like, Payton's been on the hot seat before. I think he's closer to the hot seat with Denver. I don't know if that's what I want. And it's another thing to me where like the names we think of are the names that were in the building before. Like, oh, bring Adam Thielen to be GM. Let Chad Greenway be it. Like, think of somebody who wasn't a Viking. Somebody says I should be the GM. Nobody wants that. John Dorsey. It would bring you back to stability. I would say John Dorsey makes a lot of sense after the 2 win seasons. that tend to accompany this sort of tumult. Rick Spielman's still out there. Stop. Divine Shadow says I should be the new GM. You and I together, Divine Shadow. Maybe we can cover each other's weaknesses. Look, whoever this new GM is, it's and I'll look into some of these ideas. There is somebody, Nolan Teasley. I don't know much about Nolan Teasley. Tell me who Nolan Teasley is. So I have to research these, and that's going to be a lot of next week. Oh boy, a lot of content next week. Just got figured out what it's going to be. John McKay from the Rams. Oh, Nolan Teasley from the Seahawks. Oh, so you just want to take the guy that did the right Sam Darnold move? Is that the idea? The person that was on the right side of that? The Seahawks and John Schneider have run that organization in an interesting way. It's working out great. They're in the Super Bowl. Can't argue with it. But I don't know if I kind of like the Rams idea, John McKay, a little bit better. Anyways, no, Charles Taylor, new GM does not disqualify the team for Hard Knocks, but there's a lot of teams available for Hard Knocks this year. So I don't know if it's going to come up, but, what the Wilfs have to do now is they're in a spot where they have to, they cannot bungle this again. And what I don't want is for them to do what they have done with every head coaching hire, with every GM hire which there's only one, but with every major hire that they've had since they bought the team in 2005. And to be honest, it was happening before them too, which is just get the exact opposite of the guy you just fired. Everybody does this. And it's never good. With you're the Titans and you fire Mike Vrabel, you bring in a young offensive mind. And now you fire your young offensive mind and you bring in an experienced defensive mind. It's always the exact opposite. You want to get rid of Mike Tice, who has, lost his leash on the team, can't control them. They're getting in trouble all the time. You bring in authoritarian Brad Childress. You want to get rid of Brad Childress because everybody doesn't like him. You bring in the nicest guy in the world, Leslie Frazier. You lose Leslie Frazier because he's too nice. You bring in hard-ass Mike Zimmer. It's always been what it is. Don't do that. Go find a candidate that has a good plan and stick with that plan, even if that plan is a little bit similar in vibe. Even if that guy says, I love analytics, I want to use analytics. But what I'm worried that they're going to do is go get the most old head, the guy Brad Pitt was yelling at in the Moneyball movie kind of guy and say, well, now we'll be normal. And that will not work. You can't have that be the primary motivation. You have to go get somebody. And the other thing I'm a little worried they're going to do is let this draft come and go without a GM. With an organization in complete turmoil. It is pretty there's two common times to hire a GM, and it sounds like the Vikings are going with the latter. The first is Kwesi liked analytics. We get somebody who can't count. True. Go get somebody with CTE. If you fire your GM on Black Monday, you hire your GM, like the Falcons just hired their GM yesterday, Ian Cunningham. And if the problem is the Vikings are now in a GM search and everyone else has finished theirs, which can help because you don't have any competition. You can take your time now, right? Nobody's going to take another GM job. But also, all the best candidates are gone. You waited. And so why now is such an interesting question. A lot of people will let the draft happen and then fire their GM, which feels a little weird. Why'd you let that guy do a draft if you were going to fire him? But hey, why'd you let that guy end the season if you were going to fire him at head coach is kind of the idea. For the front office, the season calendar kind of ends at the draft. That's New Year's. That's their new league year is after the draft. Then they start the process of scouting the next one. They go look at college training camps and stuff. And they start, looking at the sophomores and they start compiling data that they have from, hey, we were watching that senior at LSU, but this sophomore is interesting. And then you put that guy in. The problem with that, of course, is that you let a lame duck handle the draft, and you also have to be looking for your GM while everybody else has hired theirs. So who is it going to be? Everybody's saying Brzezinski is going to take over for the draft. I know he is. I talked about that right at the beginning of the show. You can go back if you're just joining now. I talked about at the beginning of the show that Brzezinski is supposed to handle this draft, but there's a part of me that doesn't buy that. That is a really weird way to go through the draft and then go hire your GM afterwards, rather than giving that person a little bit of time with the organization before they start their next thing. And it's just a weird way to find the draft because, like I said at the beginning of the show, but I'll reiterate it for people who are just joining, the last time Rob Brzezinski had drafting power, they drafted Christian Ponder. That happened. That was the triangle of authority, and Rob Brzezinski was one of the points of that triangle. After the draft, we intend to conduct a thorough search to identify our next general manager. I saw the thing. I know what the quote says. I just don't buy it. I don't believe them because I think that that's unbelievably stupid. There's no way they're that stupid, but maybe they're that stupid. I don't know. I think the Wilfs are they're losing a lot of favor in my eyes. I thought that as owners, because they were never the kinds of owners to cheap out. You never had issues like what the Bengals dealt with Trey Hendrickson or what the Cardinals deal with. And, their weight room sucks and all that. The facility is great. Everybody kind of respects the Vikings as an org, and I think that goes to ownership. But to me, they are losing it a little bit. Maybe they're getting older. Maybe they're getting a little bit more of a sense of urgency every year they age. But they're starting to do the things that you only see the teams that are drafting top 5 every year do. And I know a top 5 draft pick sounds good, but you don't want to go through what you need to go through to get there every year. Look, a lot more is going to happen. We'll talk more next week. This is the immediate reaction pod. So let's all take some time, process this, see what's going to happen, see where we feel, and then we'll go into more offseason stuff and a little bit of who the GM should be, what they should find out there in other draft war rooms. And, we'll move on from there. The 2026 season is happening, whether the Vikings are ready or whether they are not. And at this point, I'm about 50-50 on which one it's going to be. I will talk to you all next week. And as always, Skol.